So welcome everybody to the first E&E forum of the spring semester. We're glad everyone could make it out here today. The room is packed. The margarita bar is open. Everybody is having a great time down here in the Baker Center. So if you can't join us today, please be sure to join us for the next speaker series. My name is Dr. Charles Sims. I'm the director of the Energy and Environment Program here. And if this is your first time joining us for the E&E Forum, this is an opportunity for different disciplines across campus to come together and talk about energy and environmental issues. We have plenty of opportunities, usually in seminar series within our departments, to talk about these things. But we rarely get the chance to bust out of our departments and colleges and talk about them with other people with different points of view. And so that's what the whole seminar series is about. If you are joining us online, you should see a slide up right now that will give you instructions about how to ask questions to Dr. Schwartz at the end of the presentation. You can go to that link at the bottom, enter your questions, and then we will field those at the end of the presentation. If you're in the room here, we ask that you line up behind the mic and ask the questions into the mic so that the people that are online can hear with a question. Obviously, if you're saying it in here, we can all hear you, but the people online can't. So making sure that we keep those two audiences connected is what we're trying to do. So if you would like to receive announcements about future energy and environment forums or events at the Baker Center overall, email Elizabeth Woody at the address you see here. We will have more of these seminars coming up in the semester. We are still finalizing the schedule. But if you're worried about missing out, then please get on our mailing list, and then that way you will be assured that you get notifications of all the future forums that are coming along. We also have this presentation recorded. So if you would like to use this in a class or maybe watch it for later, you can email Elizabeth at the same email address there, and she can send you a link to the video that you can use in your class or watch later. The other thing, if you are a grad student or you're advising a grad student who would find these kinds of discussions interesting, we are also running a reading group in conjunction with this seminar series for graduate students. The purpose of this reading group is essentially to sit down and have students from different disciplines read papers that are a little bit outside their comfort zone. All the papers are generally about energy and environmental topics, but the idea is to get students to start to be able to read and communicate with other disciplines about the research they're doing, and to potentially help them foster some sort of interdisciplinary research ability as they move on after graduate school. So if you have a student or you are a student who's interested in this, email me, Charles Sims at the Baker Center, and I can get you set up with that class. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Mingjiao Jin, Director of the Institute for Secure and Sustainable Environment and Professor and Associate Head at the Department of Industrial and Systems Engineering. Ming?
Thank you, Charles. Okay, so yeah, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. John Schwartz as today's speaker for Energy and Environmental Forum. Dr. Schwartz joined UT in 2003, and he is currently a full professor at the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department, and also he directs the Tennessee Water Resource Research Center, and he got his bachelor degree from University of Missouri at Columbus, and got his master degree from Oregon State, later got his PhD from University of Illinois. Just okay, he told me that he got all his degrees, and finally he also worked for a land-grant university. So he's definitely a huge fan for land-grant institutions. He has already worked on water resources research for many, many years, worked for National Park Service and also for TDEC, and recently started to work on this urban water report card that he will talk about. So John, it's your turn.
Thank you, Ming. Should I just, because I have this one, so, yep. All right, thank you all for attending. I think this is an interesting topic that development of the Urban Waters Report Card. So we're not finished yet, so this is really just to give you the idea of where we're headed and what we have done over the past year. And so with that, I did want to regress just slightly because as noted is that I'm the director of the Tennessee Water Resources Research Center. In case you're not familiar with that, is that it's under the Institute of a Secure, Sustainable Environment. And it's one of 54 water centers in the country, which is under the National Institute of Water Resources. So we get funding every year from the USGS. And with this funding, it's actually pass-through money. So for those professors that are out there that are looking for research grants, we usually have a call about this time of year. And so if you look at our website, you'll see the call. And what I do is I ask the purpose of this money that comes in from the USGS. It's under the Water Resources Research Act. Is to conduct research based off of state priorities. And so what I do is I solicit TDEC and TVA, TDA, state agencies, and have them give me a list of what they consider their priorities, and then I put this in the solicitation. So please look at that. This year in particular, we received additional funding through the federal appropriation that was passed this fall. With the infrastructure bill, the reauthorization of the Water Resources Research Act was part of that, and all the water centers in the country did actually get a fairly substantial increase. So I have some ideas for that, and then for the students, we do actually have student grants as well, and you can submit, and in the past we've given basically $5,000 for students for maybe supply needs or if they're finishing up, etc. So please look at our website, and if you're interested, please apply. So that's a little bit of a regress, but I thought it was kind of important to let you know that we're out there and that this is our a resource for you. We're also going to be updating our web page to where there's going to be a submenu that's going to be titled Student Resources, and here we'll post jobs, specialty courses such as here, so that courses that are not offered all the time but are relevant to the environment, water resources, etc., can all be compiled in one location for students. And there's various other subjects that we'll have, but so for students, please look for that at our website as well. Okay, so then now getting into the Urban Waters Report Card. This is a statewide effort pulling together different municipalities in the state, mostly the larger municipalities, the city of Chattanooga, Memphis, Nashville, and then surrounding counties, Hamilton County, Knox County, Shelby County. It also includes the Tennessee Stormwater Association. And then also it's very supportive by the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. And of course, then we have our own faculty here that are involved, myself, Tim Gangware, who's the associate director at the Water Center, and then a staff person, Jason Brown, and then some of you may actually know Andrea Ludwig over on the Ag Campus, and of course, John Hathaway in the Department of Civil Environmental Engineering. So I won't read off the names of the other participants of this working group, but I just want to let you know that this is a statewide effort, and that we've been meeting for the past year on the monthly basis and making some pretty good progress on what the Urban Waters Report Card is going to look like at the end. And so just to kind of give you just a background on the report card and the concept of developing it, is it's primarily developed to support the stormwater programs in the state. We call that MS4s, which is separate storm sewer system, municipal separate storm sewer systems, and to develop a tool that can incrementally grade the quality of the streams. And so this will have a list of various indicator parameters that are being developed by the working group. And then for each parameter, we'll have a grading scheme. So then this is, common to we're all used to, particularly in academia, is A, B, C, D, F. So if you're an F stream, that's probably pretty bad. And if you're A stream, it's probably something like in the Smoky Mountains that you really would enjoy to see, and then everything in between. And the purpose of this is to convey to the public mostly that the money that they're spending on these programs for stormwater management is helping. Because a lot of times it's difficult to see that there's actually improvements. And so to have a vehicle for the public officials to basically say, hey, we spent $1 million on stormwater management. We didn't see, a stream go to a pristine stream, but we did move a stream from a D to a B. And so it gives the city councils, the mayors, some support for supporting environmental programs across the state. Also, too, is hopefully it's going to be a tool to help prioritize within watersheds where you put stormwater control measures. So that's the CSM, and then where you would put stream restoration projects to get the best benefit and for the lowest cost, if you will, or to get the best from the cost that you're expending. And then also, too, is just to have a consistent long-term data set that can be used to spatially and analyze temporally the changes over time. And this is really valuable because we don't really have such a data set in the state of Tennessee to look at how overall it's improving. There is a lot of data, but it's not consistently collected. So this is also a real value of the Urban Waters Report Card at the end of the day. And again, just kind of giving a backdrop as where this is coming from and this is probably somewhat pretty much common knowledge, but we know what when we change the land and converting agricultural land or forest land to urban land uses, we do change the physical, chemical, and biological characteristics of those systems, those watersheds. Hydrology, the amount of sediment that comes into the system, general water quality, temperature, the riparian vegetation, in-stream habitat, an important ecosystem process of how much organic matter and carbon is actually incorporated into the system. And so again, common knowledge we see, from urbanization, the main effects on hydrology and primarily from impervious surfaces, and where this is a figure I pulled off of EPA, where the upper left figure shows you've got runoff about 10%, and then you urbanize and you move through to a completely urbanized system, and it shows essentially I think like 50% or so runoff. And so we kind of all know that we really change the hydrology, we reduce groundwater inputs, we decrease evapotranspiration to some degree, and so we have a real effect on the hydrological system, which is a driver to watersheds and water quality. And then just in general, in urban systems really suffer from various impairments. One, from the increased flows, we get what we call channel incision, which is just basically erosion, downcutting and widening of the channel and banks failing. This brings in sediment and excessive sediment into the stream, which then causes poor water quality. Turbidity is increased. We also see elimination of floodplain areas if we develop on the floodplain, and then we remove riparian vegetation. This affects temperature. And then in general, just in the stream itself, poor physical habitat structure, pull riffle sequences, which are vital to stream ecosystems, are altered. And then we have to, in urban environments, it is a engineered system, if you will, and we have to address or deal with the construction of various infrastructure, bridges, pipe utilities, and stormwater outfalls. These can be incorporated into the system and be beneficial if they're designed properly, but that isn't typically what occurs, so they lead to impairment. So in this report card, we want to basically grade a system incrementally, going from worst maybe a completely concrete line channel, which would be an F, and then kind of improving up until we get to something that's better. One thing to note, though, in an urbanized watershed is that we'll never return to pristine because we completely modified the hydrology and the landscape and the watershed processes associated with that land conversion. So we know we can't come back to a pristine stream, which is the picture to the right, which we all would love. We can get close, but we can't get completely back to a pristine condition. So, but whatever practices we can put on the ground, stormwater control measures, stream restoration, we can move the streams from an F to maybe a B and maybe an A. A good example of actually really improvements overall, I was told by TDEC, is actually Second Creek, which is right here next to the campus. Jonathan Burr, who's a fellow at TDEC, basically indicated to me about 20 or 30 years ago, Second Creek was really bad. I mean, it's maybe not great still, but it has really improved over the years. So there can be some benefits and some improvements over time. So really what we see is the benefits of this tool is a effective public communication. So that really is kind of key, to give mayors, city councils a way to communicate in a simple way how these watersheds are being improved by all the money that they're spending for their stormwater program, which includes stream restoration. This was actually, the big part of this was that it doesn't substitute what we call the 303D list, which is a Clean Water Act designation for if you're impaired stream. And to get off that list, you have to meet certain water quality standards. So what the issue was politically in the state was that these cities are spending a lot of money for these stormwater control measures, but the streams weren't coming off the 303D list, but they were improving. So one of the main benefits of this Urban Waters Report Card is to show this incremental improvement, and even though it may not come off the 303D list. And then also, too, is to have a common tool among streams across the state that we're all measuring the same thing, because this is actually real value. So the city of Memphis can look at the data from Nashville or Chattanooga and say, oh, hey, okay, we're measuring everything the same, so we have the same baseline. And then maybe communicate with each other of like what best management practices, stormwater control measures actually work better than others, but at least they're all working from the same common tool. So that's really another benefit that we see from this Urban Waters Report Card. And again, I think I've mentioned earlier that this helps prioritize within watersheds and jurisdictions to target stormwater control measures and stream restoration projects. Because we have to prioritize it because, well, we don't have unlimited funds. I think it would be great for environmental improvement projects as if we had unlimited dollars to do so, but we don't. So we need to prioritize where we can, if we spend $1 million for the project, perhaps we can remove maybe 25 to 30% of the pollutants and then just work it down from there. Again, it's just the optimized stormwater program efforts. And then documenting this evidence of the efforts that have been expended. So when we first started out, we wanted just to look at like, okay, what are some visually appealing, report cards that are out there? So we kind of looked around. There's nothing that actually matches exactly what we want to do. And I should note that the other unique thing really about the Urban Waters Report Card is that there is no other state in the country that has what we're planning on doing, a statewide Urban Waters Report Card. There is, and I'll show some examples here where there's a city or a large basin. So there are report cards, but there's not a statewide effort. So we'll be the first in the nation to actually develop this Urban Waters Report Card. And I've had interest from other states that once we get this developed, that I think that we'll be the educators to these other states on implementing a card for their states. But to just show you some generally what we've found, so just visually kind of appealing. This is a Mississippi River Basin report card. It includes recreation, ecosystems, flood condition, risk reduction, condition and risk reduction, water supply, economy, transportation, and then each of the metrics you can see within these categories are given a grade, and they put it in this pie chart kind of schematic. So it's visually appealing. To understand exactly how the grades were developed, there you have to go in and look exactly how it's done. But this is generally the product at the end that we're looking for to convey to the public. So this is an example from the Mississippi River Basin. That's not exactly where we're headed. It's too large of a system. And then there is one that was developed for the Tennessee River Basin. This includes some stressor parameters, wildlife risk, drought, forest pests, pathogens, and sedimentation. It includes conditions, forest conductivity, aquatic insect richness, and aquatic conductivity, some management, agricultural runoff, leaching, protected forests, and protected wetlands. And so then they also developed a similar type of circular pie chart grading. And then they have a total grade in the middle, giving the Tennessee River a C for these particular metrics. So you can see in these report cards, you can just, it's up to whoever's developing these report cards is to develop the suite of metrics. I mean, so you could come up with a different Tennessee River Basin report card with different metrics and have a different grade, but this is what this group did for the Tennessee River Basin. And you can see that the different categories, stressor, condition, and management. And you can see the different parameters. It may be a little bit hard to read, but this presentation will be posted and you can have access to it. So, or you could Google the Tennessee River Basin report card and you can get to the same information. Now, one that's not so visually appealing is the state of Maryland with the Anacostia River, and it includes water quality, submerged aquatic vegetation, stormwater runoff, toxics, and trash. You can see that they provide a grade, and they give a grade over time, a trend. So this is the one thing that we want to do with the Urban Waters Report Card is to make sure that we show a trend, so we're still conceptualizing how we do that. If that's just multiple pie charts that change over time, that's probably the best way to represent it visually to the public. But so here's again another system. Now the value of this is it's not very visually appealing, but they have embedded in it criteria to determine whether a particular metric is a F or a D, etc. So I think this stream river actually really has some problems since it's F and D minus, and I guess I probably wouldn't go swimming in the Anacostia River, I guess. But anyway, so this is another one that we've borrowed from. Probably the closest one that we're kind of headed towards is actually the city of Portland, and for various watersheds in the city of Portland. And this is an example from Fannel Creek, and they've got about 4 watersheds that they created a water quality report card is how they term it. And so within their categories, they have hydrology, water quality, habitat, and fish and wildlife. And so again, you can see they're visually very appealing, this pie chart kind of idea. And then now you go to each of the categories, and then you can see the grades. So hydrology is getting a C, and then you can see they have a visual underneath that has a color scheme from red to green, going from F to A, and then so they have 2 metrics in for hydrology in essentially impervious surface area and stream conductivity. And so again, the city of Portland, that's what they chose for these 2 for hydrology category, these two metrics. And then for water quality, this is probably the simplest one because we all collect this data, and this is pretty prevalent data, but just various wet chemistry parameters, bacteria, E. coli, and you can see the list of 8 different parameters for water quality. And then habitat, a B minus, and you can see various parameters there related to this is in the Pacific Northwest, so like large wood is a very valuable habitat feature. They've got riparian surveys, floodplain condition, riparian condition, etc. for habitat. And so this is how they graded Faneuil Creek under this habitat category, giving it a B minus. And then for fish and wildlife, they give it an F. And then they have birds, fish, and macroinvertebrates as the metrics that they have. And so why it's given an F is really with fish. And then I was curious because habitat was pretty good. It's like, why is fish and wildlife category so low? But in the Pacific Northwest, there's a trout called a cutthroat trout. And there's some kind of physical barrier because they move up the stream to spawn. And so they basically prevent it from moving up into Faneuil Creek from a low-head dam barrier. And so that's why it was given an F. Anyway, but this is a general idea, kind of where we're headed. So again, I mentioned that the working group from the previous slide that I showed is that we've been working for more than a year, but we were last year we were meeting pretty intensely, again once a month, virtually, and we had come up with 4 categories. Water quality, watershed hydrology, stream corridor, and community values. And then the stream corridor category got so large, we did actually break that up into stream alteration, channel stability, stream habitat, and riparian corridor quality. So where we're at with the working group is we have our categories, and so each month we sort of march through these different categories and made suggestions on what parameters that we would consider. And so where we're at with the card is and which I'll show in the next slides, are the parameters that we've selected, but it doesn't mean that all these parameters that we've selected at the moment will end up in the report card. There's more than what we want to be feasible to implement the card. But we wanted to lay everything out on the table, and the plan is that in March, in a month or so, I'm hoping that we'll have everything ready to go for that. Is we want to have a one-day meeting. We're going to meet in the middle of the state in Murfreesboro, and we're just going to march through each of these and give a yay or nay, and actually finalize what we want to go in the report card. And then we'll go from there. But then now, just to give you an idea that within each categories, what we've selected. So water quality, we have some visual parameters. Again, these are all pretty much maybe you're familiar with, but color, floating objects, scum, excessive nutrients would be like some algae, excessive algae, illicit discharges, and then we want to focus on trash and macroplastics, and also as an important parameter. And then some basic water quality chemistry, turbidity, conductivity, DO, pH, temperature, bacteria, nutrients, biotic integrity were all chosen. I don't think all those will go into it. I think there was one city that was particular that was really interested in expanding the chemistry side where the other cities were not. So just to make a note is that one thing about this process is probably the hardest process, more than the technical side, was actually getting all these jurisdictions with different interests and objectives to work together. I would say I probably spent a half a year to actually just getting the group to just be comfortable with each other, that one's not going to do something that the other doesn't like, and feel comfortable working together. So that's a unique part. In fact, actually, TDEC was interested in me writing up an article on just how to get municipalities to work together. I thought that was kind of outside my area of expertise. But anyway, the one thing that came up when we were going through the water quality parameters was it seems like, okay, this is simple. Oh yeah, color, turbidity, etc. But then questions started coming up from the municipalities is, yeah, but where? How many? And how often? So these actually are not that simple questions when we're dealing with stormwater management programs. For example, the city of Memphis brought up the fact is that, well, if we've got a stream coming into our city, and this is an example of the Luchahatchee River enters the city, what about all the folks upstream that are polluting the stream? And then we're doing work here. How are we going to detect that our efforts here are making a change in water quality? And so then here is with the Luchahatchee, it actually enters, leaves, and then runs adjacent to the city of Memphis. So this really becomes a little tough to basically gauge whether your stormwater management program is having any effect on that water body. So there's some real technical issues that we still need to work through. We've collected water quality data from the different jurisdictions. And because the question about how many samples you need is not that too difficult from a technological side from us, is that basically we determine variance in the different parameters, and we've done a statistical power analysis to say, because I asked them, I said, well, how many years do you want to see a trend? And the group basically said, we want to be able to see a trend in 3 years. That was for them to be to go to their city council is to basically, okay, 3 years is a good time. So then I can look at the variance. I know the time frame to be able to look at the number of samples to have a significant value. And so we've been provided the municipalities a general idea of the number of samples. So there's a little bit of work to do there to come up with the protocols on how to sample, where, etc. So there's still things to work out in the report card. In urban hydrology, a key one that everybody felt was really important was floodplain storage and infiltration. And because in urban environments, there's a lot of floodplains or infrastructure on floodplains, and it affects storage, but it also affects how we would protect the infrastructure as well. And so that was a key one. Also, too, is the community felt like this could really be a good metric. There is funding that comes from FEMA, not after a disaster. It's actually money that you can get for planning, etc. So they felt like that this is a good metric to have in there to be able to get some FEMA funding for the different municipalities. Of course, impervious surface parameters make sense. And then some hydrology parameters, a flashiness index was noted. And then there was a key paper that came out that identified, they did a large statistical analysis to say, okay, what parameters do we actually see a trend from? And one was this wet season flow reversals and annual flow peak and duration metrics were in this paper. So we're using this paper to guide us on these hydrology parameters. And then it was noted just basically runoff parameters as a potential. There's also these indices of hydrological alteration that was suggested. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but they come from eco-hydrology concepts. And they basically just take continuous flow data. And this was actually developed by the Nature Conservancy. And there's a free software package that you can download. You can take USGS data, continuous data, put it into their software, and then it will produce these 30 plus hydrological metrics that, and this is just an example from the different groups and hydraulic parameters. A previous slide I have, so just not to be too noisy, is just some simple monthly conditions, flow conditions, magnitude and duration of flood frequencies, etc. But then from these different hydrological metrics, they're related to different ecosystem processes. So you make the link between hydrology and ecosystems. And so this was suggested is that if we have continuous data, which we need continuous data for these other parameters that were suggested up above, the flashing index, flow reversals, etc. We need continuous flow data to be able to do that. We can easily maybe incorporate one or more of the 30-something different indices of hydrological alteration into the report card. Again, this is still under discussion, and that the one thing that was important, which I brought up to the group, and that the real value in hydrology is to have this continuous flow measurements. Most municipalities don't have a flow measuring station. They may be lucky enough to have a USGS gauging station, but they haven't ever created gauging stations themselves. This is really quite a simple process, and the technology has gotten a lot less expensive. So anyway, I'm kind of enticing the municipalities for every stream that has they want to do a report card on, is that they develop a continuous flow monitoring station, and we can do it cheaply. So that's a service that we plan to provide to the different MS4s in the state in the future, is to help them develop a continuous flow measurement station, and then we help them develop a stage discharge relationship, because these instruments that you can mount on a bridge or within the channel, they measure stage, and you have to have then a relationship between stage and discharge, and then you by measuring stage, you could then automatically able to get discharge over time. So actually, this equipment was, well, if you hire the USGS to put in a station, it's a lot of money. But there's a lot cheaper technology to develop these stations. Dr. Hathaway in our department, he had a recently graduated a doctoral student that cheap sensors for like $100. We can install a gauging station. So this technology has really improved, and Dr. Hathaway's involved in this. And so having this data available to the cities will be really valuable. To me, I view a flow monitoring station as like going to the doctor and getting your blood pressure. It is like, it's the heartbeat of that watershed. And so we need that data. And I think they all kind of agreed on it. They're a little bit nervous about costs and that, but I think this is all part of this process of developing this urban water report card. Is for us as the water center, is to provide them the technical training to do it, and it's really quite easy. And I think once they see it, they'll all be comfortable. So then the next category is the stream corridor, which is simple measures, habitat alteration, again, fish barriers, bridges, infrastructure, impacts on the channel. The list is there: sewer lines, etc., floodplain encroachment, and then channel stability, excessive bank erosion. This is a real problem in urban environments due to the excessive flows. And I've done a lot of research in this area in channel stability, and we have some really good assessment techniques that we've have used in multiple research projects and funded and published. And I think the group, they're kind of unaware of it, but I think they're interested in learning what these rapid assessment approaches to channel stability, how easily they can be applied. So we're gonna suggest that for the Urban Waters Report Card. And then the stream habitat, various parameters. I think the easiest one is the state already goes out and does a Tennessee Habitat Index. And they do this at all their water quality stations. So wherever the TDEC goes out and takes a water sample, they also, and a biological sample with benthic background vertebrates, they also do a Tennessee Habitat Index. So there's a rich data set already. But we talked about some other metrics that could be useful: pool riffle sequences, embeddedness, the quality of the substrate for biota. And then the one that's really important overall, both to stabilize the channel, but also just from ecosystem processes in general, is riparian corridor quality, having the tree canopy next to the stream. The group also decided they wanted to, because it's an urban environment, I guess they had issues where people dump trash and debris in these areas, and they want to have this as a metric because if they want to get credit for basically if they clean it up, they want to get credit for it and show that that's part of this overall improvement. Different ideas about conductivity, hydrology in the headwaters to the lower part of the stream. Can wildlife move from one point to the other within the watershed? So there's various ideas that we're throwing out there. And so then the last category is community values. And so now this is a little bit different than most of the report cards that we have seen. But I think the group felt that community values were really important, that there is really value that people, citizens, connect to their watershed and the water through, there's definitely appreciations of greenways next to rivers or streams. People use them heavily. Chattanooga, I mean, they have a wonderful greenway, along the river, and then Knoxville as well too. We got Third Creek, and so people use those greenways heavily. The aesthetics is important, and then public education programs. The MS4s were wanting to get some credit to show that they're making some effort with the citizens within the watershed to educate them and get them engaged in stream cleanups, etc. And then the other one that we want to throw out and see where we go with this, and this is one's a little bit more challenging, but I've talked to Dr. Chris Clark over in Ag Economics, but if there's a way that we can compute the change in property values, basically when you improve the stream, is there a way that we can quantify that? Because that actually, I think, would go a long way to with mayors and city councils, that they see that there's economic development, that you get some economic benefit from improving the quality of your stream. And in part where this comes from was I was in graduate school at the University of Illinois. We did a stream restoration project up in Chicago. It was on one of the forks of the Chicago River within the city. But it was a city of North Fork. And before the stream, or the river, though it's really a stream, was just kind of trashy, and no one even knew it was there. But it ran along this business, behind this business district, where the business community leaders came up and said, hey, we would really like to make this part of this business district a nice amenity, have some restaurants that would have, some pavilions in the back, but just bring people to that business district rather than it's just a ditch in the back behind our businesses. So we actually embarked on a stream restoration project in Chicago doing that, and that was a real success by the city, and I'm sure that the property values of that business district really improved by that. So this is one aspect that we would really like to try to capture in the Urban Waters Report Card. So it's a work in progress. We have created a web page, and so here's the website. You can go to it. We have a public face, and then we have a link that only the working group members can go into, which is is where we're putting all our information at the point. So, but ultimately, we're going to have this public website, and I should note that to the right, the Urban Waters, that's our logo. So we actually have a logo that was developed by an artist, and so we'll have this site that the public can go to. On this site, the main thing is we want to have an interactive GIS layer. So I just threw the map of Tennessee with the different watersheds that are monitored by TDEC, but what we want to be able to do is zoom in and out, and then if there's a watershed that has a grade, then you can click on it, and then you can see the grade, but then it also then goes deeper into like why a stream was given a C or a B or an F, and so that's kind of where we're headed with this tool. We also want to have the tool to be usable just in general, to have different stormwater management plans, and various other support information through this web page. So again, this is a work in process, but I think this will be valuable. We did get TDEC is supportive and will help us with developing the GIS, but we may need other folks here on campus that have that skill set. But TDEC has some really good folks in GIS too, and is willing to help and support us. So moving forward, we want to finalize the list of parameters per category. Again, I mentioned that we'll meet here in about a month with everybody in a room. With the pandemic, this has been a little bit slowed down the process a bit. But getting everybody together and whether they're allowed to travel or not, fluctuates all the time. So we're just hopeful that we can get everybody together, because virtual meetings are okay. We were able to identify all these parameters through that process, but when it really gets down to it, we all need to be in a room together across a table and working through it. We have some draft standard operating procedures, SOPs. They're in draft form. And Jason Brown, that's now staff at the Water Center, between him and I, we're working to kind of clean it of the drafts up and get them finalized so we can send them to the different working group members before the meeting, so then they have an idea of like how much effort it will take to actually obtain that data. I think that's the concern by the different MS4s, was like they don't want they only have limited staff, so they don't want it to take too much time, and they have limited costs, so they don't want collecting the data to cost too much. So we're scheduled to kind of produce a beta version of the Urban Waters Report Card this spring, which then we'll test with data over the summer. It may go into the fall, and then we expect to finalize and have a completed project and up and running, say, no later than spring of next year. And then the idea is that the working group that we have now is really the large municipalities in the state. One, they actually have larger staff and that they can devote to developing this urban report cards. But once we develop the urban report card, there are 90 plus other MS4s, stormwater programs in the state. So then at the Water Center, what we'll do is once we have the actual working report card, we're going to provide training to the other 90 plus MS4s in the state so that they can implement this card within their jurisdictions, if they're interested. And so we just see this as really valuable for the state of Tennessee overall. And I think with that, I'm done and can answer any questions anybody have. You're going to have to help me now with technology. Me too.
Okay, folks. So we've got some questions that are already rolling in online, but if you have not yet had a chance and you didn't get to write down the link there at the bottom of the page, which let me bring that up, make sure everyone sees it. The link there at the bottom of the page, go there and you can type in your questions. And I will field them and send them off to Dr. Schwartz. But I'm going to jump line. Paul's already at the microphone, but I'm going to jump in front of him. I may have missed it, but how are you choosing which streams you're going to evaluate? Are these just the streams that are already on the 303D list, or are municipalities and communities opting in to ask you to monitor them, or how's that list being compiled?
At the end of the day, we're just going to let each of the jurisdictions decide which streams they want to do a report card. I think most of what I gathered from, at least with the existing working group, they want to incrementally kind of move through. They don't want to implement this, like the city of Nashville has like multiple watersheds. So it would be an enormous task for them to do a report card for every watershed, across their jurisdiction. So they're going to incrementally do, 1 or 2 a year, et cetera, and kind of, but their plan is to actually do all the watersheds that are within their jurisdictional boundary. Whether it's on the 303D list was not discussed because I think primarily if it's in an urban environment, it's probably actually listed, it's probably impaired. So, yeah, but that wasn't like a decision. There was some discussion about on the fringes, like what to do on the fringes of urbanization. I think the city of Chattanooga in particular was, they were interested in actually doing a report card on some of the watersheds that haven't been developed yet, but through their planning or, planning documents will be developed, in some future years. So they did want to have actually this report card as a datum as well as like pre-development. So this tool can be used multiple ways, and we'll just leave it up to the jurisdictions how they want to use it.
So are you worried that there may be some strategic, obviously I have to think about the strategic piece of this, right? But some strategic incentives to just offer up the streams that they already know are pristine?
No, because I think the idea, at least from this group, was they really want to target the worst ones, because the whole idea is if they're the program staff, they're trying to implement this. They have a limited amount of money. They're getting pressure from the mayor and the city councils, like, hey, we want to see improvements. I think there's incentive from them to pick the worst ones, and I did want to make a note, and I failed to say that in the presentation, is that one of the key reasons why TDEC wanted the Water Center to implement this is because they don't want this to be viewed by the municipalities to be a regulatory program. They don't want to. They want to feel. They don't want to have any threat that there's some regulatory action that's going to occur because of using this report card. And so that's why, in part, why the Water Center is a safe place to work with these municipalities. Even though TDEC is involved, they've been very careful to be in the backdrop to just as a resource, and letting the Water Center and then the working group, formulate this report card.
Oh, okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So thank you, John. I'll jump in now while Charles is looking online too. Firstly, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to ask you two things. The first is just an invitation. You advertised for us the Water Resources Center. I want to invite you, before answering my question, to advertise the Watersheds Minor and the Watersheds Group on campus.
Yes.
You want to do that first?
Yes. Well, it was a working group here on campus. Gosh, I don't forget how many years ago, but it's a grassroots group of faculty that we call the Watershed Faculty Consortium. But we developed a watershed minor, both graduate and undergraduate. And so if any students that are online that are interested in that, you can go to the website. I think it's just watersheds.edu, utk.edu. And then, and so then in our development of our, improvement of our webpage, for the Water Center, in that submenu that I mentioned that will have jobs and specialty courses, we also will have a link to the Watershed Minor as well. And we have some various ideas. If you have an idea what would be useful for you as students or for faculty as well, under this subcategory, we'd be glad to incorporate that into our revision of our new web page, because we'd like for that to be a place for students to go to get information related to water and watersheds, for resources here on campus. So thank you, Paul, to remind me.
So now the question. Right. So the working group used a bottom-up process to get to indicators. And that's got lots of advantages, right? Especially buy-in from these communities. But so the question's about practicalities, and it's kind of back to picking and choosing like Charles was, but this time on indicators. Some of those things are much easier to measure than others.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are much harder to see improvement against than others. So how do you handle the picking and choosing of indicators? So consistent reporting, which is one thing you talked about, that's at odds with everybody does something different or does it their own way.
Mm-hmm.
And from a management perspective, sometimes we want municipalities to do what's hard, not just go for the easy wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a good point, Paul. With the group, with the parameters so that working group that we're going to have in a month or so, we want to make sure that we pick parameters that we can see a trend within a reasonable amount of time. That 3-year period is the period that the working group basically has indicated that they would like to be able to see a trend. So we're going to pick parameters where we can see that, and let's see. I was going to note that if a jurisdiction wants to collect more, like again, those water quality parameters, there was a whole laundry list of wet chemistry parameters. They can cost some different, different amounts of money. There was one city in particular that wanted this whole suite of chemistry parameters, but we won't keep in saying that at the end, we want to transfer, you guys are the big boys in the state. You got money. But when we go to the other 90 MS4s, and like some of them are the public works director that runs the wastewater treatment plant, the water treatment plant, stormwater, roads, everything, they're not going to have the resources. So we're kind of defaulting to the parameters that the easiest. But if a jurisdiction wants to measure more, want to have, wet chemistry analytical techniques to find. But that may not end up in the report card. But there is a debate within the group about that they don't want the parameter to be, the measurement of it to be so qualitative that there's not value in it. So they do want it to be quantitative. So where we get there is, I think, still under discussion. I think some of the options would be say like for wet chemistry, there's multiple ways of doing it. You can do a grab sample, send it to a commercial lab. That's the most expensive. There's some Hawk kits that can do some parameters. The accuracy goes down, but still pretty useful. There's data sans to get data from. So there's a range of different techniques to collect data. There's the visual estimates. I think it's going to be a suite of different methods, but kind of tending towards the least expensive and the best bang for the buck. I don't know if does that help answer your question? Okay. So there's a lot to you think this is putting a report card together is like something really easy, but man, the questions that come out and then pulling it all together, it's like there's a lot of questions these jurisdictions they bring up. But this has been kind of the fun part of it, so working through the concerns and pulling everybody together. And they generally been a great working group. I mean, they're quite amenable, they listen to each other and they learn from each other as well. So it's been a valuable exercise so far.
So, John, the online questions are flowing in so fast now we're going to have turbidity issues. No? Bad joke? All right. So, really, there's basically two types of questions here. Okay. One is what I would call data-related questions, and another is what I'd call implementation type of questions. So, the data-related questions are really asking kind of what discuss some of the opportunities for using specific types of data to estimate stream or corridor quality, like remotely sensed data that wouldn't require necessarily sensors in the stream, maybe.
There are parameters. We basically call them like desktop parameters versus field measurement parameters. That's kind of really the two categories. So like for the one that you just mentioned, using some type of remote sensing for riparian corridor quality. That's an easy one, because we can measure the width of the tree canopy, across the channel. We don't even have to go out. There was some discussion at one point about using drones, to collect some data of that order. But then the other group is going to be, field data. You got to walk the stream. There's no way around it because, remote sensing is not going to get you to be able to see the detail that you need to see, say, like for bank erosion and some of the channel stability indices. You need to be on the ground and actually, even it may be visual and quick, you still have to be able to see the bank and the different characteristics that you're grading. And so that there's that with the different types of data, and we'll just pull that together. Again, I think this is all part of the beta testing that's required, why it's necessary, is because we'll come up with some kind of grading scheme. So we'll pick the parameters, and then we'll say, okay, this is the data that we need to grade this metric. But then we don't know like how it will scale. We'll come up with a grading system, but maybe because of the way we've set up our criteria to grade it, maybe everything's always a C. Well, we don't want that. We want to make sure that the grading scheme that we come up with really does scale from an F to an A, and we define that in a quantitative way. So that's part of the beta testing that we'll do through this summer and probably into next fall.
So what about using cell phone data to determine how much recreation or visitation there is to a stream flow or to a stream at all?
Oh, so a recreation parameter, wow. So this is where I can see we're going to have some more discussions because the city would have to do a survey, like in community values, like how much access or how much is that stream utilized along a greenway. There may have to be like daily surveys of the number of people that use that greenway, our trail along a riverway. So we'll come up with various metrics, but I don't think we're not at that detail yet. I think we're gonna propose that. But then a lot of these may be kicked out because it may take too much money or effort, kind of getting back to Paul's comment. And then, at the end of the day, we want to have a reasonable suite that actually can measure quality, but then is feasible to implement.
I mean, what are in the recreation modeling type of world right now, the big innovation is instead of putting out counters where you're counting people that are coming to visit a recreation site or come along the stream, you're just looking at the cell phone data to see where they're moving.
Oh,
right. And so how frequently they might come to visit, a trail system or a city park or what have you. You would map it using cell phone data to see where people are coming and going and how frequently they're coming and going. It's sort of like John's or Hathaway's low-cost sensors, right?
Yeah.
It saves having to go out and do the surveying, and then usually those trail counters are pretty pricey as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just that's sort of the hot topic right now in recreation stuff that we do.
Oh, that's a very good idea. You want to join the committee?
Sure.
Okay. No, I think that's actually probably a good point, is that, once I want to work with the working group at first so they feel like there's ownership from this working group. But, it may not be a bad idea is that once we kind of have this selection and we're going into the parameters, is maybe to have faculty that are interested and to provide input on how we actually measure some of these things. Because that's a really good idea, Charles, for the recreational side. And I'm sure others have, some really good experience that could provide input. I think that'd be a really good exercise. Yeah, thank you.
So there's another group of questions here that's all kind of hitting on this notion of watersheds that cross political boundaries, right? So watersheds that maybe span multiple counties, or even better, maybe span multiple states. Just maybe talk a little bit about how that process goes. I mean, obviously, if you've got, you may be apprehensive to measure stream quality in your watershed if you think that the majority of the watershed is in a neighboring jurisdiction that you have no control over. So Did that conversation come up? Is it a deterrent, or does it make for the ability to maybe bring in people who wouldn't have already been involved? If you can say, look, we're trying to estimate water quality here. Can we bring in Georgia, bring in North Carolina, or whoever it might be to work on that?
Yeah, well, we hadn't really thought about cross-state watersheds. Well, two parts of it. Yes, this did come up, and this was actually a pretty lengthy part of the conversation. That's why I had the one slide about the Loosahachie, because that was coming from the city of Memphis and Shelby County, like who's responsible for what and that. Well, we came up with really kind of like there has to be a sampling scheme is where there will have to be a location on that water body where that water body enters your city. And then, so at least you have a datum of like, if it's really terrible coming in, at least you've noted that. So that was kind of the protection that was identified, for that discussion. But another point too is I think in general we're looking at smaller. This water card or report card will be for say smaller watersheds, like a Huck 12. I think would be really kind of ideal, but probably no larger than like a Huck 8. So I mean, I'm not sure if people are familiar with that, but like a Huck 8 would be over 100 square miles, and a Huck 12 is more like about 25 square miles, kind of just some general numbers thrown out there. But I think the tendency will be probably, at least in the beginning, is for these jurisdictions to do a report card on a smaller watersheds is what I see. Yeah.
And so Third Creek would be Huck 12?
Huck 12, yep. Mm-hmm.
And then Holston River would be?
The Holston River, that's probably, Huck 8, it could be a Huck 6.
So bigger than a Huck. Okay, so
yeah.
somewhere in between those
mm-hmm.
two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's an interesting thing because jurisdictions want to get credit. There has been concern about this tool being, once it's implemented, being kind of taken over by the regulatory community and then being used as a regulatory vehicle, and that's something that we kind of battled with the whole time. And so I think everybody's comfortable at this point, except for one city I can think of. But other than that, I think I think everybody's pretty comfortable, and I think they see the real value of it for enhancing their program. And there is actually, the state is discussing allowing this report card to be used in their stormwater permit as an alternative monitoring to what's in their existing permit to save them money. But the state isn't going to force it. So this is where we have to be really careful, because the state is really talking about that this could be used within a permitting process. So, but we're not there yet. But the cities were all for that, because they saw the value of that this report card will be less expensive than the current monitoring program that they have in their stormwater MPDS permit. So they're pretty supportive of that, actually.
And I guess it provides nuance that a single measure might not provide, right? I mean,
mm-hmm.
if you find out, like your habitat example, right, they're doing fairly well in terms of a lot of things except fish, well, then that might be important nuance that would matter instead of just having one physical measure of some stream condition, right?
Yeah. The difficult part of that is that the state TDEC, they're authorized to regulate water quality, and so community values, they have no legal authority over that. So so this is where this has to kind of be worked out. And there's some discussion, but basically, the state can only really regulate water quality, and then a surrogate of biology for water quality. And so, yeah, so we have to be careful there.
Any final questions?
Well, these are really good questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we will be doing this again. If you didn't get signed up to the mailing list, please send us an email here at the Baker Center, and we will put you on our mailing list so that you can make sure you are aware of the other meetings of the Energy and Environment Forum this semester. And with that, join me in thanking our speaker today, Dr. John Schwartz.
Thank you.